All right, everybody. You ready for this? I'm Drew Hayden Taylor, an Anishinaabe author and playwright from Curve Lake First Nation. In my travels, I've seen the good side and the bad side of being Indigenous. But here's the weird thing. When I was a kid, some of my people tried to hide their Indigenous past. And in some cases, being a white passing Native guy was a blessing back then. But things have changed. Now, a veritable cornucopia of people want to be Indigenous. Media reports are full of them, from celebrated novelists.
I have always said very clearly and carefully, a small part of me is Indigenous, but it's a big part of who I am.
To acclaimed film directors.
Filmmaker Michelle Latimer. She came under fire after questions arose about her claimed Indigenous heritage.
And even a University of Saskatchewan Indigenous health expert was fired for being a pretend Indian. You know that old settler term, Indian giver.
My name's Morningstar Bear. Whew. I'm just gonna say it, I'm emotional.
Well, today we have Indian takers. So, from identity theft to counterfeit art.
This is the Indigenous Chucky.
And from stolen Indian tax benefits.
They sold thousands and thousands of these cards.
To lost jobs meant for real natives.
In this way, they are literally erasing us by replacing us.
Why are there so many fake Indians these days? Is it all about money and jobs? Or is there something deeper going on? I need to understand the Pretendians. So why do so many non-native people want to join our powwow by claiming Indigenous identity? Now, this is one of those DNA kits that seem to be so popular lately. Supposedly, it will tell you all the dirty deeds your ancestors were up to. And for those seeking some sort of cultural salvation within their 23 sets of chromosomes, this could give them the answer. And since I'm a little curious as to my own Indigenous percentage, I'm going to take this, spit into the tube, and mail it off. And see where it takes me. You might want to look away for this. Well, if I'm going to be exploring the Pretendian phenomenon, I guess I better start by establishing my own Indigenous cred. Welcome to Curve Lake. This is my community. I've lived here for almost 60 years. This is the land of my people, Aho. And yet people still say to me, "Funny, you don't look Indian. You're not native, are you?" Well, I am. This is the community where I come from, and I want to take you on a tour of it so you can understand who I am and where my perspectives were born. This house is where I grew up till I was 7 years old. Though it's been repurposed and renovated, this is where I went to school, the Mud Lake Indian Day School. It's where I learned my BACs. And this is where I get my res gas. And behind me is the fairgrounds, where we put the wow in our pow, i.e. our powwow. And this puts the curve in Curve Lake. Actually, technically it doesn't. This is Chemung Lake. There is no Curve Lake. It's called Curve Lake because the lake curves around. Never mind. This is my house, and it's a very, very fine house. And within those four walls, I write my stories about the First Nation communities of this area. I'm Drew Hayden Taylor, and I'm straight out of Curve Lake. So what's real or fake in the Indigenous world? Before I dig into what that means in terms of identity, I've journeyed to the tourist hotspot of Gastown in the west coast city of Vancouver to investigate the Indigenous art scene. Every year, tourists spend over $1 billion on Indigenous-themed art and souvenirs. But are Indigenous artists actually benefiting? Meet Francesca Fionda, an investigative journalist with Discourse magazine. She looked into Vancouver's lucrative art and souvenir shops and made a worrisome discovery.
We did an audit about 3 years ago. We visited 40 different shops, and what we found is that 75% of the shops seem to be selling inauthentic art.
Wow.
So we're gonna visit some of the tourist shops in Gastown here and check out some of the souvenirs that are being sold.
And do they know you're the reality police?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, you're incognito.
Yeah, we're gonna do some mystery shopping.
All right, well, let's go take a look at what we can find.
Sounds good.
We'll need hidden camera technology for this mystery shop.
I'm in a buying mood.
So many Indigenous themed items, so many stores, so little time.
Very kitschy. Oh, we have milkshakes and, oh, look at these.
Yeah, this label is really interesting too. It says here, genuine native Indian craft.
This is the Indigenous Chucky. Well, I think I know what I'm getting my partner for her birthday.
Yeah.
All right, I have a test for you.
Okay.
I want to see if you can judge a couple of items I have for their authenticity.
Sure.
Let's start with this. That looks real to me.
So I'm more of an expert on asking questions. And so the first question that I would have here is if there's any information at all about an artist. Because there are some Indigenous artists that will sell their designs and it can be mass produced and they'll get royalties. In this case, yeah, there's no information. This company was actually one that we tried to contact multiple times. They didn't respond, so this was categorized as inauthentic.
Ah, even though it says Vancouver on the front?
Even though, yeah.
Inauthentic. Next on our list, oh, I think Barbie has let herself go. What can you tell me about this?
Well, so first thing I'm looking for is the label, and they have some information. There's some kind of smallish print here that actually says that this is not authentic, and that's because in the United States they actually have a law against selling fraudulent Indigenous art. And so that being said, this is definitely not an authentic piece of
You're telling me this isn't a real Indigenous product?
That's right.
So what makes an authentic Indigenous item? Indigenous design. Whether it's a unique carving or a mass-produced souvenir, if there's an Indigenous artist behind it, then it's authentic. Even the Museum of Vancouver, which has over 70,000 Indigenous items, now displays mass-produced Native art in collaboration with authentic artists. Curator Sharon Fortney shows me past examples of fakes and some of the new pieces they've acquired. This stuff you've shown me has been appropriated by the dominant culture to make money for themselves. These other objects have been made with the cooperation of Indigenous artists who have designed them, licensed their image out in sort of cooperation.
Right. See, they have his name on the label.
Right.
They identify what communities he's from. It's just, you know, a really beautiful, colorful, contemporary expression of identity.
Yeah. So what tips does Francesca have for the shopper who wants to buy something authentic and meaningful to take home?
One of the things that I heard from artists was that labels can make a really big difference. Is there information on a product that tells somebody who the artist is, where they're from, and whether or not they're getting royalties? And so if you are out there looking to buy something, do a little research and make sure that you are buying something authentic.
Authenticity matters, especially when it comes to that most iconic of West Coast Indigenous symbols, the totem pole. Totem pole forgeries can be found all over Canada. But here, in British Columbia, they're sacred objects, symbols of kinship, clan, culture, and storytelling history. So, how much is at stake when that gets faked? I'm here in Chilliwack to explore that idea. I'm going to be talking to a traditional Nisga'a carver who has some very strong ideas about who can and can't carve a totem pole and why.
My name is Mike Dangley. My traditional name is Gotsamils. My Tlingit name is Teeth Klain. I am an artist and carver, and you're here in my studio in Chilliwack, British Columbia.
But you're primarily known for like totem poles and masks?
I just finished my 27th totem pole, and I'm starting 2 more.
Mike's totem poles aren't just pretty to look at. They anchor deep cultural meaning in the places they inhabit. But there are a lot of other totem poles out there that might not have the same kind of heritage. Now, in today's society, there are people out there who, shall we say, practice what you practice, but you might argue that they don't respect what they're doing.
So for when I started doing the art, I spent a year learning how to draw. I spent a year sweeping the floor, sharpening the knives. But I also spent all that time with my grandfather since I was very young, learning our adawach, our oral history, our ayuk, our laws.
Those laws apply to the whole creative process, even before Mike picks out a piece of wood.
We have to know that adawach, we have to know the history before we can go and do just anything. Say, I don't know what clan you are.
Otter.
Otter. Okay, so for me to do a piece for you, I would have to understand that thoroughly. I would have to study Otter clan to do artwork for you. I'd have to ask you a bunch of questions. It's just like writing. You can't just tell a story without knowing your subject matter.
Right.
So there's a lot of artists that unfortunately haven't received that education, and they're creating art that they have no business doing.
That brings to mind a totem pole that's just a short drive from my reserve at a park in Peterborough, Ontario. It was carved by an Anishinaabe artist. I myself am Anishinaabe, and unless I missed something in Anishinaabe class, we don't have a totem pole tradition. So, is this native on native cultural appropriation? The totem pole was skillfully handcrafted by a local artist of Hiawatha First Nation. It was designed with care. What would Mike think of this well-intentioned imitation?
I think people who aren't trained in that way, who aren't West Coast, no matter how much they want to honor it and how much they love it, still doesn't give them those rights and that privilege.
Okay, lesson learned. But will things be as clear-cut when we stop exploring fake Native art and move on to fake Indigenous identity? As I well know, skin color isn't a good indicator when looking into fake Indigenous identity claims. So what about blood quantum, or the amount of Native blood coursing through one's veins? How much is enough? In order to answer this conundrum, I propose an experiment using both red wine and white wine. So, for obvious metaphoric and symbolic reasoning, this glass of wine will represent my people, and this represents white people. Now, pay attention, there may be some math involved. I'm going to take a couple drops of this red blood and deposit them into 1,000 to 2,000 drops of white blood. Now, those couple drops in there, are they enough to qualify you as Indigenous? To me, the math is simple. No. But for some people, it seems that's a subjective question. Like, how many drops of rain does it take to get me wet when I arrive at the University of Montreal? This is ground zero for an explosion of Indigenous ancestry claims in Eastern Canada. Why? Lisa Dillon is a historic demographer, and she may have the answer. I was told this university has one of the best archives compiled for such a thing. Is that true?
Yes, we have the Registre de la Population du Québec Ancien, which is a database of a couple of million individuals who lived in the Quebec colony since 1621. The Catholic Church produced a very comprehensive set of baptismal marriage and burial records. We have the first and last name of the parents and the child, and dates and places, so it's possible to reconstruct a comprehensive genealogy.
There are a lot of people who are claiming Indigenous heritage based on a lone ancestor sometime in the 16 or 1700s. Do you come across that frequently?
Well, most French Canadians do have an Indigenous ancestor. It's just that when you look at all of their ancestors, the weight of that ancestor is a very small percentage of their genetic makeup.
It's just a drop in a bucket then, a larger bucket.
It is.
I'm having trouble picturing what that bucket looks like, but fortunately, Lisa has a really effective visual aid.
This is a really good visualization of 10 generations.
So we're talking, this would cover about 300, 350 years.
Yes. So we start at the core, and these are the parents, and then each concentric circle that moves outwards is another generation of ancestors.
How many would you say are here, represented here? Like, are we talking 200-300 people?
A few thousand.
A few thousand
Couple
people,
thousand.
and if one person happens to be that native person in the 1700s,
Yeah.
that would be one name out of several thousand ancestors?
Yes,
The proverbial needle in the haystack?
exactly. That'd be a needle in a haystack.
Do you think you might have an Indigenous needle in that haystack? It's not as hard to find out as you'd think.
Now, all of the microfilms have been transferred to a digital image, which is available on our genealogical website, and anyone in the world can consult them. They're available online.
Since the early 2000s, tens of thousands of people from Quebec and the Maritime provinces have scoured these archives in an attempt to claim indigeneity. There has been a reported explosion of people calling themselves Eastern Métis.
In Quebec, the increase has been from about 15,000 people who are identifying as Métis to about 70,000. If we look at Nova Scotia, the increase has gone from 830 in 1996 to 23,315.
For the record, being Métis doesn't just mean having mixed blood. And the leadership of the real Métis Nation of Manitoba is up in arms about it.
You can't just pop up tomorrow and say you're Métis. And that's what's been happening in Eastern Canada. It's starting to happen in Ontario. We are facing invasion.
A Métis person actually has to be connected to a historic Métis community that has continued into present day. And there is, by all research and historical accounts, never been Métis communities in the Maritime provinces, in Mi'kmaq territory, ever. And that's pretty conclusive.
The fact is, thousands of these new claims point back here to these archives and a handful of families who lived in the mid-1600s. So we have been investigating the stories of the Eastern Métis who are claiming certain Indigenous rights based on having substantial Indigenous heritage. And you're saying that's mathematically unlikely.
It's mathematically impossible to say that you have substantial Indigenous heritage if your heritage is from this French-Canadian Catholic population. Their ancestral heritage may have a small 1%, 2% representation of Indigenous peoples, but they are trying to leverage that representation, that small percentage, to ask for benefits today, and that's a big leap.
So why has there been such an explosion of new status claims? That's a hotly contested question. But after my research, I've come up with several reasons. First, the Supreme Court of Canada's 1999 Marshall decision granted expanded fishing and hunting rights to natives. If you're white, wouldn't you want those rights? Second, white settler guilt. As more Canadians question how their ancestors have treated Native people and their land claims, more folks are seeking to be on the Indigenous side. And third, benefits. To deal with historic injustices, tax, education, and job subsidies have been granted to Native people to try and even the playing field. One of my favorites is cheap res gas, when you flash your status card at the pump. Perhaps unsurprisingly, that particular perk has led to fake status cards. And there probably isn't another person in Canada who has seen more of them than this man.
My name is Rick Obamswo, and I'm the chief of the Abenaki Nation of Odanak.
Welcome to Rick's Odanak gas station. And that innocent-looking counter over there can be the front lines in the battle between authentic and inauthentic status cards.
So what she's doing there, she's verifying the card that it's a real card. These cards became a very, very big problem. They're self-proclaiming that they're Native, that they have Native ancestry, and here's my card to prove it.
And who creates these cards? Where can I get one?
Yeah, well, you can buy them. You can. There was a group called the Native Alliance, and this would cost you about $350. They sold thousands and thousands of these cards.
The thousands of people who spent $350 on these cards were apparently miffed when they were told they still had to pay gas tax. Rick had to develop a clear-cut system to turn them down without getting into a big argument every time.
So the way this works is, if someone comes with a card that's not a real card, what we had to do, what she has to do, is she turns and says to them, these are the cards we accept. We do not accept any other card. There was a real time period where it was happening almost every second day. The more and more that we've been putting these type of systems in place, we see it less and less today.
So why don't reservation gas station owners just let it slide once in a while? Nobody likes paying tax at the pumps, after all. Well, it's never a victimless crime.
Businesses are trying to do the right thing. You know, a native comes in, they got a card, okay, I'm supposed to give them tax exempt, so they're trying to do the right thing. The problem comes in is that the obligation is on the business. So if these cards are fake, the business can in turn be charged the tax. And you'll never find this customer to chase them down.
Rick owns and operates 5 businesses. And as chief, he tries to educate business owners because the stakes get a lot bigger than a tank of gas. Think about the tax you spend when you buy, say, a shiny new truck.
The law states that if anything is delivered to the reservation, it's tax exempt. The Indian Act is clear at that. So these guys go to a car lot, they buy a car, and they say, can you deliver it to the closest reserve? So they come here, they park in front of my building here, they take a picture of their car in front of my sign, and they sign off, they don't have to pay tax. But meanwhile, their card wasn't real. So what we've had to do is we've had to educate a lot of the car lots, God, it's from here to Sherbrooke, telling them what a real card was. And if they were going to deliver a vehicle or a snowmobile or anything to my community, they need to contact us first. We have caught, oh God, I've got to say, over 100 people with fake cards right here. Okay, and I'll tell the dealership this is a fake card, get off my property, or I'm going to call the police.
Rick, ever the businessman, has taken a hard-nosed stance on Indian status and who can benefit from it. But what happens when we choose to adopt a settler into one of our communities? Should they benefit too? Even that can be complicated. Prior to 1985, any white woman that married an Indigenous man was legally granted status. That status remained even after divorce or death of the husband. Back home in Curve Lake, my journalist friend Angela Lavalle wants to break bannock over this issue. Angela has strong opinions about what marrying into a First Nation should entitle you to.
In my mind, if there was a marriage breakdown, the woman should relinquish her status because she is not Indian. You can't tell. It drives me insane. It's like you're married. If you married a German woman tomorrow, would you be German, Drew?
No, I would not be.
So if you married somebody from Mexico, would you be Mexican?
I would not be.
Would you go around saying I'm a Mexican?
No.
Would you cook Mexican?
I might.
So if you cooked Mexican, would that make you a Mexican?
No, it would not. For Angela, when people marry into a First Nation, they should not receive the financial benefits of being a status Indian. Like the 2018 Williams Treaty payout, which was awarded to my people for the land we lost when the Trent-Severn Waterway was created.
Their ancestors did not go through the horrific times of when the Williams Treaty was being, negotiated.
You're saying they're like just passengers in the car?
They are visitors.
Visitors.
Wives, husbands, yes. Part of the community, yes, but not Anishinaabe. I believe that the Williams Treaty money should have went to Williams Treaty people, and that's it. There has to be a line somewhere.
Right. Yes, lines need to be drawn, but unfortunately, for too many years, they've been erased, even at one of Canada's most prestigious universities. When it comes to pretend Indians, the problem doesn't stop at the Canadian border. Pretendians are a huge problem in the U.S., and this North Carolina Cherokee woman has had enough of it.
My name's Liana Costantino, and I am the director of TAF, the Tribal Alliance Against Frauds. We call it fraud because that's what it is. It is actually theft and fraud, identity theft and fraud. So when people steal from our cultures, they end up distorting our cultures into something that we don't even recognize. In this way, they are literally erasing us by replacing us.
Liana took up this calling because the Cherokee, her tribe, is the most frequently impersonated by fraudsters in America.
There is a group of white people in Georgia pretending to be a Cherokee tribe who prints their own Cherokee money and opened up their own Cherokee bank. They have no political or racial ties whatsoever to the Cherokee people.
And being Cherokee means appearing on the original census rolls, which are governed by the tribe itself.
So if you claim to have a Cherokee ancestor, we ask for that ancestor who was born between 1890 and 1940. We connect you to them, and then we connect them back and see if they were on any of our Cherokee rolls. If we find out that they were, terrific. You know, that's a non-issue at that point. If we find out that they were not, we inform the person and let them know that you have no connection to the Cherokee tribe or the Cherokee people. You know, just don't go forward continuing to claim that you're Cherokee based on an unfounded family myth that nobody ever bothered to check out.
So why do so many people falsely claim to be Cherokee?
Some people do it for financial gain. They discover that they can get all kinds of benefits by claiming to be a minority-owned business. Students get scholarships from universities by ticking a box that says they're Indigenous or Native American, and they don't have to prove anything. They just tick that box, apply for the scholarship, get it, nobody checks. Nobody knows how to check.
It's one thing to vet a student, but what about a prestigious university professor who's claimed Cherokee roots for over 30 years?
We at TAF heard about Robert Lovelace at Queen's University last year in June of 2021 when that open letter came out about the Pretendian fraud at Queen's. We did his genealogy. We had his genealogy confirmed with all 3 Cherokee federally recognized tribes. I have letters from all 3 of them in my possession that say he has 0 Cherokee ancestry, 0 kinship with us, no tribal community connection whatsoever. We don't know who this person is, claiming to be a Cherokee up in Canada. Did he have to go all the way to Canada to claim to be Cherokee and get away with it? He's not getting away with it any longer. We're done waiting.
The Tribal Alliance Against Frauds is small but mighty, and they have a travel budget. I meet Liana in Kingston, Ontario, where she's come on a mission to confront Robert Lovelace.
What do you think Robert's response is going to be?
Typically what we see in Pretendians like Robert is that they scurry and hide. They will come up with all kinds of excuses as to why they don't want to talk to us, which is, I think, what we're seeing here, but I could be wrong.
Have you tried to contact him prior to coming up here?
We did. I wrote him a letter 2 weeks ago. He has not responded. I will try to reach out to him tomorrow if he's willing to talk. And I think that he will not come clean because he cannot come clean. He has no proof of anything. If he did, he would have shown it by now. Hi, this is Liana Costantino of TAF, the Tribal Alliance Against Frauds. And I was wondering, would Mr. Lovelace be available tomorrow for a short visit?
As Liana stuffs letters and the census data proving to Queen's University that Bob Lovelace has no Cherokee blood in him, the story gets even weirder. Since immigrating to Canada in 1969, Mr. Lovelace has gained a powerful Indigenous voice by helping to establish a new Algonquin First Nation, even serving as its chief.
My name is Robert Lovelace. I'm a member of the Ardoch Algonquin First Nation. That's an Indigenous community in the Ottawa Valley of Canada.
But Ardoch is not federally recognized, and many status Algonquins, like Veldon Coburn, think that Ardoch's voice and existence should be questioned.
So this Ardoch First Nation, as they're now calling themselves, is not really a geographically, territorially bound sort of First Nation, as it were. I mean, the closest thing to an Ardoch is like a little hamlet out in the middle of nowhere, which isn't actually populated or governed by Algonquin or Indigenous people.
So, based on what you told me, it's not recognized by your nation or any nation?
No, even those that are non-status First Nations, they don't recognize them either. So, yeah, no one recognizes them.
Have you ever been there?
Never.
No? Well, I thought I'd go check it out. There's a road, a house or two, and a mailbox. It doesn't feel like a living, breathing First Nation community to me. And I should know, I've been to over 150 of them. So, what is Ardoch?
It actually just doesn't exist physically. So it exists as a website. It's a Facebook page. And all you have to do to become a member of the Ardoch and Allies, First Nation, or what have you, is sign a one-page membership self-declaration form.
Veldon isn't the only Algonquin angry about Ardoch. Meet Lynn Gell, who spent 32 years fighting the federal government to gain her own Algonquin status, yet has seen people using dubious links to the Ardoch First Nation to gain positions of power, particularly at universities like Queen's.
I'm really not happy with the fact that Pretendians, they have my skin in the game. They have my skin in the game. They didn't live my life. And race does matter. They're taking opportunities, not only job opportunities from us, but they are a barrier. They are making a lot of decisions about who gets into programs, who gets scholarship, who gets to have research dollars. And it's really important that we allow Algonquins to shape Algonquin knowledge production, not Pretendians. They shouldn't be professors. They shouldn't be getting scholarships that are intended for Indigenous people.
While Lynn is troubled about the way false Algonquin claims are impacting places like Queen's University, Leanna Constantino is equally concerned how her own Cherokee tribe is being maligned for the same reasons.
All of those students are thinking, oh, I'm taking this doctoral level course on Indigeneity with Robert Lovelace, the Cherokee elder. He is speaking from the perspective of a white man playing Indian. He has no Cherokee perspective. He never lived among us. He never had a Cherokee family who taught him Cherokee culture or language or anything like that. So all of those students are being defrauded.
So how does the Robert Lovelace story end? Our numerous requests to have Robert Lovelace speak on camera for this film were declined. So Leanna hits Queen's campus with her Cherokee tribal letters and genealogical data, hoping for a response from Mr. Lovelace.
Hello. I was wondering if Robert Lovelace might be around. I would so much rather be sitting at home beading, or volunteering for the Red Cross, or a dozen other things, cooking, reading, than having to do this. Shouldn't be necessary. But here we are.
Your call is being transferred to an attendant because the owner of this mailbox is not accepting messages.
It's so toxic and it needs to stop. We need better laws, we need more recognition. It's just not okay that people tried to exterminate us and now they're trying to be us. It doesn't fly. Robert Lovelace was outed over a year ago as a fraud. The university has done nothing about it during the past year.
What should the university have done?
The university here should do what the University of Saskatchewan did with Carrie Barassa, force him to resign.
Yes, that same Carrie Barassa you saw earlier in this film. Her story, and others like it, have made national headlines and forced Canadian institutions to react. After Leanna's visit to Queen's, the university released an advisory report that they had commissioned on these issues. It acknowledges the odd relationship between Queen's University and an entity calling themselves Ardoch, and goes on to say Ardoch is not a First Nation, despite it positioning itself as such. Robert Lovelace's name does not appear in the report, and as of now, he is still employed by the university. When it comes to the Pretendian issue, Have we gone too far in trying to out people? Let's just say things are getting intense. There are even lists circulating all through the social media of supposed pretendians put together by anonymous sources, and it's impacting real people. One of those people is Cindy Baskin, a social work professor who's been employed for 25 years at Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson University. Last year, a list called Pretendians for Hire was published anonymously online, and Cindy was on it. That led to a petition demanding she lose her job. I've come to hear her side of the story. All right, let's deal with the moose in the room. Do you consider yourself to be Indigenous?
Yes, I am Mi'kmaq on my dad's side, and I am Celtic on my mom's side.
Then that begs the question, why do some people think you're not Native? Do you know?
Not exactly. I know little bits. Somebody sent me what is supposed to be my genealogy chart, and they have it wrong. Even on my mother's side, they have it wrong.
Which is the Celtic side, you said?
Yeah.
These situations get tricky, and I'm no genealogist. When someone like Cindy claims an Indigenous past, while anonymous websites claim the opposite, who decides? That's what employers are faced with. And while they're working it out, the personal toll can be profound. Has it had a personal effect upon you?
It definitely has. It has caused an enormous amount of stress. I've done lots of crying about it, and, just been scared about, where is this gonna go?
Cindy's attackers were relentless, contacting both the university and her book publisher. But she's managed to weather the storm. So where do things stand now?
Well, I'm not getting fired. I'm still doing the trainings and the workshops like I always have been. So, yeah, I don't know who these people are. I don't know how to respond, because if you don't know who they are, how do you respond to anybody? All I've done since I came to this city as a young one is work really, really hard for the Native community. I've always done that.
The debate over how much heritage or blood is needed for one to be considered an Indian isn't simple. And when I travel to the University of Waterloo's Indigenous Student Center, I discover more about people's sense of self.
The name I was given at birth is Braden Peter Lehman, but I was also given the name Dahogut when I was 4 by my Uncle Charlie, who was the chief of the Wolf Clan on the Oneida Reserve. I am actually only a quarter Oneida. Is being a quarter enough? That's a question I've struggled with myself, being that, again, I am visibly white. I am mostly white, but I do have that quarter side that is Indigenous, and I'm generally most connected to that side of my family. I actually do have status. I finally got the card because I was refused at a gas station on the Oneida Reserve. I don't look Indigenous, but I am.
I also know something about expressing one's indigeneity when you don't look like they think you should. You know, skin color, straight black hair, wild rice dripping out of your pockets. People can treat you very differently because of that.
Well, to an extent, with the being only a quarter First Nations, I don't feel the most accepted by the Indigenous community. Like, I've talked with my father about this, and he also doesn't feel the most accepted by the Indigenous community. Sure, he's more than me, but he's half. And with that, I just feel like I need to kind of display that more. I have an earring with a feather on it, symbolizing the Indigenous status as well. I like to wear this jacket, so I've got my name painted here, and I've got the Hiawatha belt. And then on the back, there has been an occasion before where I've been called out by a non-Indigenous person for wearing this jacket because they assumed I was not Indigenous. And then I go, "Hi, my name is Dahogut," and then their complete tonality changes. I don't consider myself a pretend Indian.
Braden has 25% Native blood, a status card, and relatives on a reserve, but still feels the need to assert his identity. So what happens when your blood quantum is even lower, and you're on a journey to understand your own family's lost connection to a First Nation? Jadam Hunt of the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center grapples with that question every day.
So you're in this position to help the students try and find their voice as somebody who's gone through that procedure themselves.
This is actually where I began my identity journey, I'd like to call it. I never met my father, which is where my Indigenous ancestry comes from. I was 23 when I found out about my father dying by suicide, and that was kind of a big turning point in my life. It was at that time that I started, being invited to sweat lodges and things, and I thought, oh, I shouldn't be going there because I don't have status. And so this was a narrative that I carried forward, was that because I didn't have status, that I wasn't able to partake in any of the ceremony or, being a part of, being Indigenous.
But here at the university, Jadam took a path towards self-identification. She learned that her great-great-grandmother was a full-blooded Mohawk who was in the residential school system.
That means that I'm like 1/16th, which gets me to thinking like, well, I'm not enough, right? And then there's that question of, well, who determines who's enough?
Jadam has applied for her status card, so the Canadian government will decide her fate. She's also reaching out to Mohawks from the reserve her Indigenous relatives came from, hoping for acceptance and deeper validation.
From what I've seen, a very big important part is making sure that the community also accepts you. And so I know this community accepts me, but I haven't done the work in my own community that my family is a part of, and I'm gonna do that because I want to know.
Many have legitimately lost their links to First Nation ancestors. And perhaps these are not the people we should be judging. But there are still so many with no authentic Indigenous connections now coming to us for something they can't seem to find elsewhere. What are they looking for?
I'll tell you what I see. A lot of people all of a sudden become Indian, and it's the romantic end of it. It's the powwow dancing. I'm going to ceremonies. It's all beautiful. Everybody loves each other. Everybody likes each other.
I think there's an identity gap. State nationalism wipes their identity, that need for identity, that need for feast food, that need for regalia, that need for prayer, that need for ritual. They're really important shapers of who we are. And when that's been wiped out of you and all you're doing is singing "O Canada," eventually it doesn't sustain you, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, there's some good Native wisdom for you. There are people out there in need of cultural sustenance. We also understand that imitation is supposed to be the best form of flattery. But people, you have to draw the line somewhere. My grandfather's grandmother was Irish. You don't see me waving a shillelagh around. Understand us, accept us, but please, don't try to be us. As for the number of Indigenous drops of blood in my veins, remember this? All right, it's 3 weeks later, and my DNA results are in. How Indigenous am I? It says